What's going on, guys? So today we are sitting in a very little simple scene in my backyard. I got some flowers. I was going to go on location, but this is going to be my location. And I'm not going to talk drones. I am going to get back to my roots and talk about iPhone photography. So, been using the iPhone since the iPhone 4, the very beginning. Had a campaign with Apple and the iPhone 6 world or realm. I don't know when that was exactly, but I've pretty much been an Apple guy since 1984 for a long time, and I've really always felt that this camera on the iPhone has been really strong and a really powerful tool, even before people really caught on and Apple started marketing. And that was kind of the reason I got the Apple campaign, just a little backstory, because I was using my iPhone camera a little bit more seriously than the majority of people because they truly didn't understand the ability of the camera at that point. So this was years ago, mind you, before GoPro and stuff. And I was using my camera in an underwater housing in Hawaii, and people always kind of laughed at me, but guess what? I landed an ad campaign with Apple. Out of 10 million people, they chose 167, and I was one of the 167 out of 10 million. So apparently I think I was doing something right. But let's talk about macro photography and the iPhone. I had a friend of mine call me today asking about her iPhone 14 Pro Max, confusion with the macro modes and what to do to get really close to a subject like a flower. So I figured why not do a little video and explain that to her and explain that to everyone to avoid confusion. And it is kind of confusing because a lot of times this iOS wants to do so much thinking for us, which is kind of annoying. I just rather be a manual guy and control everything, but that's part of the iOS and a lot of the computational photography and blah, blah, blah. It's part of the beauty, I guess, of the camera system because it is so complex and it does some pretty amazing stuff, like exposing things really well. There's a lot of nature around me. I don't know if you could hear, but there's a cardinal flying right behind the camera. But I'm gonna go ahead and talk macro photography with my iPhone. This is an iPhone 13 Pro Max. I am gonna put it into a screen recording, and then we're gonna go ahead and talk about these flowers and how to utilize the macro ability of the camera. And whenever you're learning something, just so you're aware, I would sit with one subject. Don't go out in the field necessarily. If you do, just sit with a flower and sit with it for an hour and really figure out what's going on with your camera. It's a great way to learn about photography. You could sit with a flower like this, or you could sit with a salt and pepper shaker and just play around with ISO, aperture, shutter speed, for example, and see what makes it brighter, what makes it darker, what it does, if it adds more grain. It's a good way of learning with just one subject, essentially. So let's go ahead, and we got our screen recording shut off for some reason. And we're gonna go back, and now we have our home screen. So right now we have our camera icon in the lower right-hand corner. Hopefully these birds aren't too noisy, but they're really loud behind me. Got some nesting birds behind me. But if you see, when we go into the camera icon, did you see that little yellow in the lower left-hand corner? There was a macro button. So if I go really close to the flower, that's going to enable. And what that's going to do is get us the ability to get really close to a subject like this little flower, which is cool, really beautiful, right? But if I tap it, guess what? It's not going to be in focus anymore. I would have to get physically further back from the subject matter, or what I can do is go to the 3x camera, and guess what? I'm kind of right back into that same composition that I was with the 1x zoom camera. Boom, enable that little button by tapping it, and now we got that. Basically the same kind of composition as this. And I don't know, yes, we can actually, with the 3x, have this super macro ability as well, or not with the video, just with the 3x zoom lens, or we can tap it and move further away. So when you have the macro enabled, essentially what it does is gets you more in focus, so we have more stuff that's sharp in the background. So like, for example, right like this, we have the 1x zoom with the macro ability, and see that house and stuff in the background? If I turn that off, look what happens. That goes out of focus, and we have a shallower depth of field, and that's that. But let's go ahead and just get out of here for a second and get into the camera settings. So you're aware, if we go into settings and we scroll down, I'm going to scroll up just to get back to where we were, but if we scroll down, we're going to scroll all the way to camera, and we're going to click it, and we have formats, and that's what I keep mine on. Now mind you, Apple ProRAW is key. To get the most out of your photos, you need to shoot in Apple ProRAW. So for that being said, that is definitely always toggled on for me. I have most compatible, and then over here, grid is also really important for composition, the rule of third grid. I have the mirror front camera turned off. I have view outside the frame turned on so I could see and compose a little bit better. I have lens correction on, but you need to be aware of this macro control for what we're talking about today, which is macro shooting with your iPhone. So it says show camera control for automatically switching to the ultra wide camera to capture macro photos and videos. So I'm going to keep that enabled, and if I turn it off, this is what happens. If I go back into shooting, guess what? It's not going to show that little yellow flower anymore. So if you're wondering how to get rid of that flower icon, that's how. And it's going to basically, I don't know if it still allows you to get pretty close, but I think maybe it just does it automatically and it doesn't allow you to toggle. I think that's what it actually is doing. But I'm going to keep that on so I have manual control of that. And I know just by seeing that little yellow button again, I'm going to go back and try to look at these flowers. So say right now I want to take a picture. There we go. We got some flowers. I can tap on the little white guy. And from there, if I want, I could also scrub the screen down to lower the brightness or to make it brighter. I can go and hit the 3 time to zoom in on the flower, and then I can physically move the phone closer. That's not going to be in focus, or further back, and there we see it's in focus. I can take a picture really quickly, and that's that. Now it's switched into this weird macro mode in the 3 time lens, which I don't think looks that great, and I don't really use that. If I'm going to use the 3 time lens for macro, I'm going to go ahead and not keep that enabled. So essentially, if I'm in the 3 time lens, I never use that macro ability. All I do is physically move the iPhone closer to the subject. If it goes into that little flower mode, to me, it just doesn't seem to do a good job. I don't know why, but that's what I stay away from. And then if I use the 1 time lens, essentially if I go to the same flower, I can compose, let me see. I'm going to enable that again, and there we go. So that's a good macro shot for that flower, maybe like that. And the great thing with an iPhone is obviously being able to move it around in a really easy way because it's so small. You can get really low, you can do all kinds of stuff creatively, but just know that this macro button will essentially give you more depth of field, which to me looks a little bit less creative, but it will allow you to physically get closer to something like that. So if you want to get the tightest picture you can out of your iPhone, you want that enabled, like that. So that's like real macro photography, right? Look at that. That's what I would consider macroscape type scenes or landscapes and macro photography. This is kind of what I really kind of got into early on with photography because it's really abstract and painter-like and trippy and just super cool. And I really, really fell in love with that. And a good friend of mine, Michelle Wortman, who is the wife of my good friend Guy Atchison, who's my tattoo artist and friend. And yeah, she was a really inspirational photographer. And this is a lot of the stuff she kind of shot. So anyway, that's that. But if I turn that off, this is what happens. I can't physically get that type of shot anymore. I can get close to it or close enough, but I can't get that super tight macro abstract goodness that we're wanting. I stay in the 1 time zoom, and if that doesn't get me the range I want, I'll maybe try the 3 time. Like that looks really nice to me. So that's more of a pretty picture like that. Maybe I'll go over here. And then if I go back to 1 and enable the little macro mode, then I can get really abstract and tight. So there we go, like that. So hope that helps. And if you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you like to shoot macro-wise. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns about this video. I would say play around and just see what works for you. The only way to figure this truly out is to shoot with your iPhone or your camera a lot and figure it out on your own. See what works, see what doesn't work, see what gives you a better result, see what doesn't. Take notes if you have to. Keep the Apple ProRAW enabled. I would keep the macro on just because you have a little bit more control and you can physically see what's going on. And yeah, that's it. Happy shooting and aloha. Bye.